friends. May the Lord be with you. I'm Mrs. Basso, and I am so glad that you're here with me to listen to some stories that I've picked out today. I already have my candle lit, and it is lit to remind us that Christ is with us when we gather together in spirit. So I picked these two stories out because they remind me of preparing for getting ready for school that's coming up, and no matter what format it may be for you, school is going to happen, and it's just a nice way to prepare for school, and I hope you enjoy them. My first book is Mr. Seahorse by Eric Carle. He had written it and he had illustrated it. So let's begin. Mr. Seahorse. Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist this way and that. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," she said. "Can I help?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes, thank you," said Mrs. Seahorse, and she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpet fish hidden in a patch of reeds. Before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest, and right away Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch." "Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. I know, Mr. Seahorse. Mrs. Tilapia laid her eggs. Now you are taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Curtis?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtis. "Mrs. Curtis laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch." "You are doing a good job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind a rock. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. "Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You should feel proud of yourself," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Bullhead?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Tip-top," replied Mr. Bullhead. "Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs hatched. Now I'm babysitting." "You are doing a fine job, Mr. Seahorse," and swam on his way. The time had come for the Seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that. At last the babies tumbled from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tried to come back into the pouch. "Oh no," said Mr. Seahorse, "I do love you, but now you are ready to be on your own." And that's the end of Mr. Seahorse. I wonder how all of those sea creatures knew how to take care of their eggs. I wonder how all of those fathers felt right before they hatched. Well, I hope you liked that story and enjoyed the colorful pictures and the creativity, and just think about new life and the science and natural living of it all. And now I have another one. It's kind of different. This one is called The Whisper, and it is written and illustrated by Pamela Zagarenski. Now I invite you for this book to put the video on pause and take a long look at the illustrations in this book, because there's a lot going on in each picture, and you'll see why when you listen to the story. And I think that they are beautiful and meaningful, and if you get a chance to look at every detail, it really means a lot to the story. So here is The Whisper. There once was a little girl who loved stories. She loved how the words and pictures took her to new and secret places that existed in a world all around her own. The characters became her friends, and quite often she grew to love them. One afternoon, while waiting for school to be dismissed, the little girl noticed a mysterious book perched high up on a single shelf. "What's that book?" she asked her teacher. "That's a magical book of stories," replied her teacher. "It was a gift from my grandmother when I was just about your age. I have an idea. Would you like to borrow it for the night?" "Oh, yes, please, thank you," said the little girl. Just as the clock struck 3, the teacher gave her the book, and with great anticipation, the little girl sprinted out the door and ran all the way home. Once home, the little girl greeted her dog and ate supper, and when she was just about to burst with excitement, she escaped to her room to read. The little girl opened the book and began turning through the pages one by one. Each picture was more beautiful and curious than the next. By the time she arrived at the very last page, she could scarcely see, for her eyes were filled with tears. Where were the words? Where were the stories? It's just not a book of stories without any words, she thought. As the little girl paged through the wordless book, she heard the wind blow and then a small whisper. Dear little girl, don't be disappointed. You can imagine the words. You can imagine the stories. Start with a few simple words and imagine from there. Remember, beginnings, middles, and ends of stories can always be changed and imagined differently. There are never any rules, rights, or wrongs in imagining. Imagining just is. The whisper sounded so knowing and wise to the little girl that she opened the book to the first page and began. At first she felt difficult to imagine a story, so she looked harder at the picture. Are the bears best friends? She wondered. Maybe the blue bear is bringing honey as a gift. Bears love honey. Blue Bear's Visit. Now that's a good title, she thought. Then she began to tell herself a story. Blue Bear arrived on the first day of spring. He promised. The little girl studied the second picture. There's that little rabbit again, she thought. I wonder what that man is saying to the magnificent ox. I know. The secret. Mr. Ox, you must please promise not to tell anyone, but we need your help. Last week, the words began to come more and more easily to the little girl. Then the words grew into sentences, and the sentences became stories. The quest. Their 100-mile journey began in a sturdy wooden boat. Are we there yet? Asked Rabbit. In another 2 days and 1 night, replied Lion. Oh, that's a very long time. I forgot. Please remind me again where we are going? Asked Rabbit. Tiger's Prayer. All the creatures of the land, near and far, would be coming, and preparations were being made. The clown in the pointed hat would play music on his accordion. The wind horse would jump through hoops. Tea would be served exactly at noon, for Tiger had something important to say. A birthday party. As instructed, we arrived at exactly 3:33. 1 4-leaf clover and a large pot of hot steeping tea had been purposely placed near the entrance of the woods. An owl perched in a tree to our left asked, "Who, who?" And we promptly answered with the secret password. Our job was to bring the birthday cake, vanilla with vanilla cream frosting and black raspberry filling with exactly 6 candles on top. Pan was very particular, and you could never quite know what to expect, but he insisted on throwing the surprise birthday party for a magical cloak. One night, a mysterious man in an elaborate cloak sailed into our harbor. Quite quickly, it became obvious to us that he was some kind of wizard or magician, for he could blow bubbles in the shapes of things. What was even more extraordinary was that the bubbles, once released, became real. Before long, enormous white whales filled our once calm harbor. Amazing as it was to see, we had to do something quickly to the Golden Key. That very morning, Owl told us he would pick us up at midnight. We must be on time and prepare for anything. He held the small golden key tightly in his beak as we flew into the indigo night sky. We were ready to face word by word, hour after hour. The little girl imagined an entire story for each page, and when the moon was full and bright, she grew sleepy and drifted off into a dream world woven out of the threads of the pictures and the stories she had imagined. When she woke, the little girl felt grateful for the small knowing whisper. Already she missed her new friends, the ox, the owl, and the tiger. She yearned to open the book once again, but the sun was up over the horizon and the birds were already fluttering about, chirping their morning songs. She did not want to be late for school, so she tidied herself, scooped up the book, and rushed out the door. Along the path, she met a fox holding a curiously round package. "Excuse me, little girl," said the fox. "I believe I have the words to your book. I saw them spill away, and because I am a very clever kind of fox, I caught them in my net just before they drifted too far off." "Oh, thank you," replied the little girl, feeling a bit confused. "Now please, before you leave, could I bother you for a small favor?" asked the fox. "Why, of course," answered the little girl. The fox thanked the little girl, and the little girl thanked the fox, and she gathered the book and the bundle of words and hurried down the path toward school once again. "I am so sorry I am late," said the little girl, still catching her breath. "There was a whisper, and I imagined stories for every picture, and I overslept, and the words, I didn't know that they had fallen away, but the clever fox caught them in his net, but I loved your book, and I almost forgot. Thank you. I have so many stories to tell you." "I can't wait to hear," replied the teacher with a smile. And on the very last page, here's the little fox. The last story is The Fox and the Grapes. A famished fox saw some clusters of ripe black grapes hanging from a vine. She resorted to all her tricks to get them. And then this is all scratched out. She changed her mind to the story, but then reimagined it. But this fox is of the very clever kind, so she imagined her story differently. And it says, "And the grapes tasted ever so sweet." The end. I hope you enjoyed that story too. I wonder how the little girl felt when she found out that there were no words to the book that her teacher gave her to read. I wonder, do you ever hear whispers about what to do or what you're thinking about? Anybody have any creativity that comes through a whisper? Any thoughts? So, I hope you enjoyed the stories. And I hope you have a wonderful time going back to school again, in no matter what format that may be. So it's time for our Lord's Prayer, and if you know it by heart, then I invite you to recite it along with me. But I do have this graphic if we need to read it together. So let's begin. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So I'm going to change the light of the candle now. I have this glass and my candle here. And I'm going to make the light of this candle change so it's not just here, but instead it is going to be in other places all at once. Well, my friends, have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you really soon. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and grant you peace. Amen. Bye, everybody.